Here's my stunningly different panel. We decided that one person tweeted yesterday asking where were the women on an all-male panel. So we thought we'd brown things up a little bit. And we also thought we'd just get you ready for Will Smith. So you needed, it's been pretty white so far, so we just thought we'd tone it down a little bit. So I want to take you very quickly through a couple of slides, and then we're going to have a conversation. And the heart of these slides is to really address the uncomfortable question, which is the uncomfortable question of persuasive inequality. It is so overwhelmingly clear that the world is unfair and unjust, and the markets have a big role to play in transformation. Here's the challenge which the UN has laid out before the nations of the world, the companies of the world, and the peoples of the world, which is to bring dignity to the poor. And in order to do that, the United Nations and a whole ton of companies and NGOs agreed that these 17 Sustainable Development Goals would be the right way to think about the future. Could we achieve the end of poverty? Could we bring about fair justice? Could we make sure there was clean water for everyone? Could we make sure there was sound education for all? Was it possible to do that? And in many people's minds, when they think about these Sustainable Development Goals, they think, hang on, that's just more aid. But what we want to do this afternoon is to persuade you that this is not about aid. This is entirely about money and the markets. This is a transformative opportunity. So this is the size of the world economy. You all know those kind of things. If you put together international aid assistance that comes mainly from the rich countries, you then look at the amount of global remittances which are available in the market every single year. It's people who are living, for example, in Europe, sending money back to their families in Asia or in Africa. And you then move on to wonder, well, what's around in the alternative investment market? Could you put that somewhere in the pot? What's the size of the market? You know these figures better than I do. You add in some specific mechanisms for funding available now, and you put it all together, you've got 857 billion. And what is needed is 5 trillion a year more every year between now and 2030. So with all the aid in the world, with all the remittances in the world, with all the foreign direct investment in the world, and with all the existing tools for impact funds, we're never going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. In which case, persistent, persuasive poverty will remain the reality of our world. And then the pain of that becomes part of our reality and our problem. So what we want to address is, can it be funded a different way? Here is what market analysis has looked at already. There is a market in bringing the poor into equality, justice, and financial freedom. The obvious place, China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. Ask, can it be done? Yes, it can. Korea was in the same GDP as Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya in 1962. Is it possible to create economies that actually drive economy from the poor? The answer is yes. And of course, it's not just possible to drive economy, it's also possible to have stunning, amazing, incredible jobs. So here's my panel. I've got wonderful 3 people, one of them differently dressed in the middle, so we ignore him for the moment. And we're over on the side. So just to express the brownness of our panel a little bit. So Giles Gunesekera, who was born of Sri Lankan background, but born in New Zealand and living now in Australia. Kwame Williams, who was born in Ghana and then moved at the age of 8 to the US to study and now is back in Ghana. And I've got over here the managing director of Capricorn, which is an investment fund, and this is Dipender Saluja, and he was born in India and now lives in California. And I'm from Angolan background with Panamanian mother. So there you go. This is the brown team. Let me start with you. Let me start with you, Kwame. If we ask the question, is it possible to bring economy to the poor? This is exactly what you're doing in Ghana. So you studied aerospace engineering at MIT. You could have gone and worked, well, you did do work at NASA. You could have carried on working at NASA. Right. But instead, you're producing powders and creams and oils. Why?
Because fundamentally, what I learned in 2012 when I made this pivotal decision was that money grows on trees. That the moringa trees that I saw in the houses of rural farmers actually in it held the key to unlocking the poverty that I also witnessed in the communities. So they were saying, hey, this is a miracle tree. The leaves are incredibly nutritious. Gram for gram, more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk, more protein than eggs. And I'm like, hold up. Let's go to the facts. Let's look at the science. And the science proved that even the seeds of the tree contain incredible cosmetic oil that outperformed argan, coconut, and shea. And so the question then became, what am I going to do with this newfound information? Can we connect the dots? Can we connect farmers to the value in their moringa trees? Can we create brands that make the products that we process from moringa globally relevant? And we're 4 years in, and we've been able to do that. We've been able to provide livelihoods for 2,900 farmers, taken a household forgotten crop and turned that into over $500,000 worth of income into their households, paying for school fees, medical bills. And so fundamentally, we're seeing that money does grow on moringa trees, and more than that, right, as we raise investment and scale our work, this is something that can scale wherever moringa grows.
So just explain to everyone the moringa tree and the seed and the leaves. It's a tiny little seed, and where does the tree grow?
Absolutely. So the seed itself and the tree is native to India, so the planter's home, but has been propagated across the tropics and subtropics worldwide. Aid organizations like the World Vision planted moringa as a way to combat rural malnutrition. The challenge, though, is they didn't create an economic incentive for farmers to cultivate this as a farm, as a source of income. So we met farmers who were cutting down their moringa tree, saying, hey, I don't know what to do with the seeds of the tree. Can you help? And what we ultimately realized is that the oil is just packed full of fatty acids. So it has the highest naturally occurring concentration of behenic acid, which is the same stuff in every single moisturizer you use. It has a unique plant hormone called zeaxanthin that has incredible anti-aging benefits. So we started to realize that in this forgotten tree was really the answer to the hunger and poverty we're also witnessing, and that it wasn't just a problem, but really an opportunity that we had to capitalize on to start changing the livelihoods and improving the livelihoods of rural farmers.
So the seed produced, just hold up the oil.
Yeah, absolutely. So the seed produces this oil. So for the ladies, it's an incredible hair, face, and body oil. For the gentlemen, great beard oil. And for the couples, let's just say it's a great massage oil. And the leaves of the tree, we turn as well into a line of food and a line of dry tea, beverages, and snack food products that we also sell.
And that food product that you're getting from the leaves of the trees is in massive demand in the US.
As I sit here, we have MOUs worth $1.2 million this year alone. We have another $3 million pipeline of demand for just that piece of our business. So, yes.
So in other words, you've been able to create an economy around a seed in a tree that most people didn't know what to do with. You've created jobs, you've created resources, you've created a market worldwide. The market has enormous potential, but there's one other big opportunity with moringa.
Absolutely. So the leaves are booming in the food space. The oil is booming in the beauty space. And what we've worked out over the past 4 years is that even our byproducts is valuable. And specifically, we've done some interesting experiments using our byproducts to treat wastewater and actually coagulate dirt from wastewater from the clothing and textile industry in Ghana. And so there's now an incredible opportunity to take even our waste and monetize that as a way to purify water and treat wastewater. So
now, just
really
so that people don't miss this point, when you think of the Sustainable Development Goals, you think of the poverty of water issues, you look at the issues in Cape Town at the moment, the lack of water as a result of drought, the severe issues around water availability. What you're saying is that this product can coagulate the dirt and clean the water.
Exactly. So it has something called a cationic polyelectrolyte. Think of dirt as super negatively charged, and moringa super positively charged. They like to come together, opposites attract. So yes, I can put this into wastewater from batik. So I can take a vial of 10 different dyes in water, put moringa, part of the tree that our byproduct into it, coagulate all the dyes, and pour away the water. So yes, absolutely. So I think that's fundamental to a part of our growth strategy, to say how can we continue to monetize every single part of this tree in a way where farmers win, in a way where investors get returns, and we can all tell our moms that they were wrong when they told us money does not grow on trees.
It quite literally does. Now, before I go on to Giles in a minute, just one more point really on that, Kwame, which is that when we met in Rome about 3 years ago, was it 2 years, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
And you were then going on to Ghana and you were going to go start the business. Were you looking for aid, for handouts, or how did you get the cash?
Yeah, so we fundamentally believe that we had something that would provide investors a return. And we were fortunate enough to leave, to start the business with grant capital. So I do think there's a place for using grants to test out R&D in essence. But once we realized that we've created a model, once we realized that there was a market, we went and actually raised a convertible note. So we raised about $1 million in 2016 as our seed round, and are now scaling up to do an A round somewhere between 3 and 5 million this year.
So Giles, you lead the Global Impact Initiative, and that's come out of the fact that you, as a result of all of your work, discovered that there was a market to be made, to be had, to be delivered in providing solutions to the poor.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael. So just because this is being taped, and this is the only time I'm ever going to be able to say this, welcome to the support act to Will Smith. By way of a bit of background, I've spent my life in traditional funds management, my working career in funds management, so 20 plus years working for predominantly global players. Simultaneously, however, and for about 30 plus years, I've volunteered, been a director on a number of not-for-profit boards ranging from human rights to disabilities to sport and arts, and also set up a couple of NGOs myself that support communities in Sri Lanka. And so for a long time, I was looking for a way to combine my two worlds, you know, my business world and the not-for-profit world. And what I was getting increasingly frustrated was, you know, in the business community, in the corporate community, there's typically a lot of capital chasing very few good ideas. And in the not-for-profit sector, it's the opposite. There's really great ideas and very little capital. And so when I started looking at impact investing and studying it, I thought this is a great way to bring my worlds together. But there's people like Dipender and the great work that Capricorn do and the Rockefeller Foundation that have been able to harness capital, use it to obtain those positive returns, and then also create enormous social benefits. And for those of you that aren't aware or haven't picked up, I'm from Australia. We have $1 trillion retirement savings market. We have one of the first compulsory retirement savings market in the world. We are a population of 25 million people and we have $1 trillion in savings. And that's because our compulsory savings system, retirement savings system, started in 1983. So because of that, there's a lot of money there, and the vision and the mission behind Global Impact Initiative is to make money, but is also to have social benefit and to create social impact. So we work with family offices, foundations and pension funds to do impact investing at scale and to get social benefits. And all our work is mapped back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So our conversations start, first and foremost, with what's the social impact we want to create, how do we measure it, how do we monitor it, and then how do we implement an investment case to support the social impact that we're trying to achieve.
So when you hear a story like Kwame's story, does that surprise you, or does that say, there's thousands of those out there?
Oh no, there's thousands.
Millions, no. Maybe even.
There's potentially millions. And what we do and what we do with organisations like Kwame's and others is institutionalise them. So help them get to a point where I can go to a pension fund and say, I know you'd rather write a cheque for $200 million than $2 million. Here's a collection of investments that you can that fit a particular theme. So it could be around food or renewables or whatever the case may be. With obviously an organisation like Kwame's, it cuts across so many different sustainable development goals. And you know, one of our projects, we're doing affordable housing project in Mumbai. Oh. You know, it's a 12 to 15% financial return, and it ticks off all 17 SDGs.
So just describe that. It's quite an interesting model.
Yeah. So we've been working on this for about 2.5, 3 years in Mumbai, and the initial plan was, let's bulldoze a slum, let's build a building in its place, and let's move all the slum dwellers in there. The problem with that is that the majority of the people in those slums don't actually want that to happen. They're very happy. They've had generations of their families have lived in that slum. Their commerce is outside their front door. They've got relationships that have gone on for generations. So what we decided instead to do was to engage the community, find out what they wanted. So the model is we've engaged NGOs who go in and find families that want to move into a building, wanting to move into an apartment. Once we do that, once we've found that family, we help them with their paperwork, we help them open bank accounts, we help them to open grants which are available not just to property developers but to individuals and families who want to move in. The Modi government is extremely positive. It has great policy on affordable housing. Once they've moved into the apartment, the NGO continues to check in on them. Because as you could probably imagine, when you have moved suddenly into an environment where there's 4 walls and a locked door and running water, and that's the first time this has happened to you in your life, you can get quite spooked. And so the ability to work with NGOs who help people through that process is something that we've found advantageous. The returns that you get commercially is the apartment building, half of it is given to slum dwellers, although their grant goes back into the fund. The other half is rented out commercially. Capital appreciation on the land in Mumbai alone is around about 7 to 8%. You get rental income, you get microfinance as well as part of your returns because we're using some of the capital that we raise to give finance to women, predominantly for business. And so you have this great apartment complex that's getting you a 12 to 15% return and we also, as part of the deal, with every slum dweller that moves into the apartment, we say to them, you have the apartment, but we now get to capture your data. So we get to capture the size of the family, the education levels of the family, how they're progressing through school. So we get to capture all that data, which then helps us, achieve those sustainable development goals. But obviously, from a very micro perspective, from an apartment building perspective, but this has the ability to be leveraged and to be rolled out, not just across India, but across a number of different slums across the world.
So being realistic but also ambitious, some people would be tending to say, well, housing is the government's problem. That's all down to Mr. Modi and his government to solve it. But you're saying the solution is a good return because of the property and the land and the value of the property asset, and actually the market can solve the problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the constant feedback from pension funds and institutional investors in particular is, give me a product or a strategy that has a similar return to something comparable. So if I can provide an affordable housing project that has a 12 to 15% return with a whole bunch of really important social benefits, and then they're looking at a standard property fund or a standard housing asset that returns similar, they're going to choose the one that has the returns and the social benefit. It's a work in progress. The interesting thing is, and I speak at conferences in Europe and the US and Australia, this has been done already, so this sounds like this is the new world. Every pension fund north of Paris is already doing this sort of work. They're already thinking about, they're not thinking about it, they're doing it. So they're investing in impact investments where they get a financial return and a social outcome, and they're doing it at scale. The APBs and the Norges banks, they're already doing it. Where it's not happening in the US. Part of the reason is because you have very large family offices and foundations that do this already very successfully. And so while there hasn't been a burning platform as such, the need has already been, has been adhered to. But could you just imagine, and similarly in Australia, family offices and foundations have been performing this role. What we're about is to get institutional capital into this market and get them to understand that they can have both, and get them to get the sort of returns that family offices and foundations have been getting for decades.
So, Dipender, this is exactly the world you occupy. You are a big-scale investor. You handle billions of dollars of other people's resources, but you're also a major investor in startups. You're a close friend of Elon Musk. You're a close friend of Jeff Skoll. You were right in there at the beginning of the Tesla story, and you hear this conversation, and does this kind of liven your heart?
Yeah, I mean, this is the world we live in. The slight twist to our life is that I just completed 30 years in Silicon Valley and came from the technology world spent the first half of my professional life sort of doing technology companies, some of the ones that we talked about, and was attracted to this potential of basically marrying high tech with the large markets of energy, healthcare, food, agriculture, water, oceans, space, etc. And so what our goal has been over the last decade or so has been investing in these very exciting, transformative sort of technology companies that we think have a big potential to become multi-billion-dollar companies, to address some of these large challenges in the world, be highly profitable, and without any compromise on the financial return, have a very positive impact on the world. It sounds almost idealistic, but we've seen the potential, and we've been living it and loving it for the last decade or so.
Give us some specifics.
Sure. So we've deployed about $1 billion in venture, early stage venture, in the space, and about $1 billion in sort of downstream infrastructure, a couple of billion there. And so we've tried to do it at a bit of scale. One of our first investments was Tesla, you mentioned. We were one of the early outside private investors, and that was about 12 years ago. Obviously a great ride, fun up and down, and now has changed the world of transportation. You know, I remember 12, 13 years ago, people were laughing at us and saying, you know, is there a future in electric golf carts, and what are you guys doing, and where's the muscle? And you know, at this point, this is the first automotive company that has gone public in, I don't know, 60 years, is worth more than Chrysler and, I don't know, approaching the value of GM and Ford, et cetera, and has clearly jolted the whole space. More than just creating amazing value, has created this new way of looking at transportation, and now everybody is scurrying to do it, and I think in 5 years, it'll be hard for us to find a meaningful automotive company that doesn't have the majority of their fleet moving to electric. Similarly, space. So we seed invested a company called Planet Labs just 6 years ago, and now they're the largest operator of satellites in the world. They have 206 satellites, and they do Earth imaging like nobody has done before. They image every spot on Earth every day, take about 40 terabytes of pictures, and monitor the health of the Earth, and are able to provide data like nobody else to the insurance industry, to hedge funds, to transportation, to construction, to mapping. Last year, about a year ago, Google, who had been transforming space, decided they wanted this little company to own all their satellites, sold them all their satellites, and now has a data contract with them. And you can imagine all the other companies sort of going there. And you know, we have 30 examples like that, similar things in nuclear fusion, which offers the promise of incredibly cheap, very clean, no nuclear waste really, type of energy, which has been sort of this panacea for the longest time. And with all these advancements in power electronics that have happened over the last 20 years, completely different approach of doing it sort of Moore's Law-ish. And then the same in sensors, building materials, data centers. We don't have time to discuss, but we have it's basically almost limitless right now. And we think it's the answer to the scaling. This is not a small opportunity. This is not a cottage industry. We think there's several $1 trillion of opportunity in downstream infrastructure type of investments. I think we've been talking all week about digitization. That's what technology did. It enabled all that infrastructure to digitize. And now we're seeing this next cycle where for 15 years, people have been kind of milking that electronic technology infrastructure with software, which is a very important part of all of this. And we are sort of on that cusp of the next wave of hard tech investments, which a lot of the world has not done, and we think it's a great opportunity.
So you're persuaded, and you're succeeding, and you're doing it, but maybe not everybody here is persuaded. Maybe the investment fund holders are not yet persuaded. And so what is the argument that's got to be put in order for it to be won?
So I think you just have to look at the data, right? There isn't enough of it. A lot of us, and we are guilty of that too, we're sort of doing it for ourselves and not really talking much about it because a lot of people used to ridicule this idea of high impact and high returns. We decided to do it with our money for 10 years before going out and doing it with others. And our goal was to beat every market index and in that asset class, whichever asset class we invested in. And we've been thrilled, right, with the results. Yesterday, as many of you might know, Ashby Monk at Stanford, who's worked with a lot of large funds and works with large sovereign firms. Until now, he was more focused on structures. And yesterday, he released a 68-page paper that basically talks about how this kind of investing is producing what he calls abnormal 4.5% to 5% type of.
You had a quote there, didn't you?
Yeah, I'll pull it up because it'll take me a minute here. But it's all over the press, and he's talking about the larger company class, but we see it in the private investment side day in and day out. And I think from a convincing point of view, it's all about data. It's all about looking at it. Now, like new trends, it is a new trend, which means many people in the room have career risk by sticking their neck out, right? I remember having arguments with endowments who were saying, as fiduciaries, we need to make sure that we are heavily invested in fossil fuels because that's what makes money. And anybody who was in coal between 2011 and last year has seen 98% of the largest American coal companies' market caps evaporate. I don't know what fiduciary duty that is. It makes no sense. And so, but very few people probably got fired because everybody else lost that money too.
Yes.
So I think it's just a question of, for those of you who are fans of Grantham, right? He says this day in and day out. I've seen him pitch to people that you need to break from the herd and look at the data and get out and do something that everybody else isn't doing.
So when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals and you see the need, which is still very acute, there is still obviously a need for aid resources. There's a battle happening politically around reducing aid. There's a front page in a UK newspaper today campaigning about the end of aid, and one of the most prominent politicians in the UK today handing in to the Prime Minister a petition saying, slash aid, we don't need it anymore. But there is still a need for some aid, but really solving the big problem is going to be all about releasing the resources that you have your fingertips on, but so do all of these people have their fingertips on.
Yeah, so, I'm not an expert in being able to answer the question of this or that. I know that this is one approach that will scale.
Yes.
I mean, just let me use a couple of statistics just to get behind it, right? So I mentioned a few categories. Let's pick two. Let's pick energy and transportation, because those are easy. Massive markets, right? $trillion markets. The country that I grew up in India, today per capita energy consumption, even though it's quote unquote a global power, per capita energy consumption is roughly 1/15 that of the West. Per capita transportation usage is roughly 1/30 that of the West. This is a country of 1.5 billion people, growing 7% or whatever. It's supposed to be the next superpower, and they're 1/30 that of the rest of the country. So as they catch up, which they are marching towards on energy and transportation, that's roughly a gap of 15 times to 30 times in multi-trillion-dollar markets. Now, maybe they'll do it better. Hopefully they'll do it better, because anybody who's been to Delhi, God knows, need to do it better than the rest of the world. Maybe they'll do it better. So maybe they'll do it twice as good. Maybe they'll do it 3 times as good. But 1.5 billion people about to consume 6 times the amount of energy that the rest of the West has consumed per capita is a huge opportunity. I don't know how many dollar bills that is. So I just don't see this even as a question or a mystery. Now, the role of aid, I think there's a lot of problems that would require aid. But clearly, this is not for the room like this to sit down and say, aid is not my business, so I can't play a role in it. In fact, I would say this room and the multiple $1 trillion that are out there play a big role, make a lot of money, and have a positive impact. The chief economist of the World Bank, who was at Oxford at a session that a few people in this room were, he said, and I'm sure you all have your numbers, there's $14 trillion of negative yield sitting out there. That's not tough competition.
Hasn't he got a great voice? Just so soothing, isn't it? Great voice for radio, we were just saying.
Is there alpha in it?
Now, Kwame, you live in a country where aid is still received significantly, but you're providing commercial, competitive solutions that are giving people significantly greater incomes. Right. So if many people might have had an income at, say, $1.50 a day, as a consequence of your work, what are they now earning?
So we're 4 to 10x in income through our work with rural farmers, based on the amount of moringa they cultivate with us. And so we're taking people fundamentally from below the poverty line, so less than $2 a day, $1.50 a day, to earning $2,000 plus per acre they grow with us. That's taking them from poverty to middle income, all through one tree and the things that we create from that tree and sell globally.
Yeah.
By the way, you want a tweetable ag factoid?
Yeah.
We're going to grow more food in the next 50 years than we have in the last 10,000 years.
Yes.
How's that for an opportunity?
Well, and a lot of it's going to be in African land, isn't
Exactly.
it?
In fact, Africa is one continent, sadly, which has not enjoyed the yield benefits that the rest of the world has, right? Yeah. Asia is largely caught up. Latin America is largely caught up. Sadly, if you look at the yield curves, Africa is still pretty much flat. So there's the big opportunity.
There is the opportunity. Immense. So when you sit there in Accra, also when you go out and you look at your hundreds of acres and the farmers you work with, does your heart still say, okay, we still need aid, but we really need capital resources, investment funds, the kind of will to turn this into a market of the future? And from where you sit, what is the conversation in Ghana about that side of the equation?
So I think that the fundamental opportunity is for people like myself to say, hey, I'm moving back to Ghana or I'm in Ghana and I want to take the reins of creating the world that we believe Ghana could be, right? So fundamentally say, what are the resources I have around me? How can I leverage that to address the immense challenges we see, whether it's hunger, poverty, poor access to education, sanitation, water. And I think the government, right, the rhetoric, particularly this new administration, is, yes, we want aid, but it's time for us to better utilize that aid to build sustainable systems that scale. For me as an entrepreneur, we've done very little with the Ghanaian government. We've done very little with the resources in Ghana, just because they've been so political. We've said, let's get our hands and feet dirty. Let's put our passion into the things that we see around us, and let's really leverage the global marketplace to do this, right? So we could have very easily said, oh, let's create another moringa product and sell it locally. But we didn't. We said, let's go to where we're seeing the market trends. So we formed partnerships with Aveda, for example, who's using our oil and skincare products. Tomorrow, our oil samples go out to 50,000 subscribers on Birchbox. So we started to leverage the global opportunity and connect that back to the farmers that we want to help. So that's kind of how we are approaching things. We're just saying, let's look at what's happening in the global marketplace. Let's use that to enable impact on the ground. Whether or not aid comes,
so in a different life, you could have been on a rocket heading up into the moon. You could be circling the Earth. You could be a NASA top scientist. I mean, you're an MIT product, as it were, and you're hyper smart and you've got high qualifications. Do you regret producing oil and food and not being away from NASA?
Not at all. Not at all. I still geek out about aerospace, so I still watch launches. I've been on. I spent some time at the Kennedy Space Flight Center, at the Goddard Space Flight Center. I sat next to the lunar robotic arm. Yeah. So I love all of those things. But the reality is that all of that was a blessing to me, right? I gained immense skills and opportunities, and now I'm getting to leverage that to impact people. I just had a series of field visits just before leaving Ghana to come here, and one of our farmers is like, I'm thinking, hey, we're helping you increase your income, and that's the real benefit. And she's sharing about the fact that she now has dignity as well in buying chairs so that I can now visit her and sit with her and her kids. I'm hearing some of our farm teams say, I used to chop down trees in this very community, right, growing the deforestation problem. Now, I'm working on this farm to plant trees. We're one of the biggest tree planters in Ghana. We've planted over 500,000 trees to date, and we're gearing up for another 1 million tree planting campaign. So someone who used to deforest is now afforesting the very community, all because of what we do. And I couldn't have gotten that at the Goddard Space Flight Center. And the cool thing is that we've actually created an opportunity for individuals to lend to us. And one of our lenders is actually someone who works at Goddard. So it's come full circle. Where I would have been working, someone is there now saying, hey, I believe in this. Take my dollars and leverage it to make an impact in Ghana.
Now, Giles, you have also got a passion, which is for turning the resources available in the market towards solving some of the tensions that women and girls struggle with in the developing world. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of the strategies that we're launching in April of this year with an Australian bank, can't mention any names at the moment, but simultaneously we're going to launch the same strategy with a global private bank, an insurance company, and then one of those aid agencies you were talking about. Is we've developed an impact investing strategy that is focused on empowering women and girls. And it effectively looks like a global equities product. So we've gone to a very large fund manager and said, here's the screens, this is what we're trying to achieve from a social perspective. Can you build us an equity strategy that enables us to translate social impact into an investment case? The issue we had was that we were trying to find investable opportunities for girls, and there's very few listed liquid opportunities that are focused on girls' health, education and nutrition. So we've actually teamed up with a very large NGO that has 5,000 staff, a $700 million income statement, and they are out there looking and investing predominantly grants into girls' initiatives that support health, nutrition and education. And so to your point about aid and ecosystems, this is exactly what the SDGs is doing at the moment. It's getting all these parties talking to each other. I mean, just this week I was at a UN Finance Innovations Committee. I mean, the UN never even knew how to spell finance, prior to the SDGs, but they've realised that they can engage different sectors. So at this meeting there was PIMCO, UBS, BlackRock, and then there was NGOs, family offices, foundations, like literally, OPEC and the UN, all talking about how do we harness financial capital and innovate to solve social problems.
Now we're in the last 40 seconds of our time, so very quickly, which SDG do you most want to achieve? Giles, only one.
Oh, geez.
Okay, Kwame.
No, I'll answer that. Gender.
Gender. So
Yep.
is it 5?
5.
Number 5. Kwame.
I'm going to say the life and land one, so creating an ecosystem, afforestation.
Dependent?
Clean energy.
Clean energy. And you've got a quote sitting right
Yes,
there.
I do.
Go on, go for
it. Can I end with that? So, to his question, why do people hesitate? It's because most people assume that doing this kind of investing is obviously going to return less or compromise the return. So, the study that was just released yesterday says this study seeks to remedy this by empirically investigating the risk-return relationship of low-carbon investment and characteristics of carbon-efficient firms. Based on 74,486 observations of US firms from January 2005 to December 2015, we construct a carbon-efficient minus inefficient portfolio by carbon intensity, revenue-adjusted GHG emissions at firm level. We find that our portfolio generates positive abnormal returns since 2010, which cannot be explained by well-known risk factors. The findings demonstrate that an investment strategy of long carbon efficient and short carbon inefficient firms would produce abnormal returns of 3.5 to 5.4% per year.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be down to you to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. You get the argument. Thank our panel. Aren't they wonderful? Thank you.